Welcome to the Half Yard Line. I'm Tim.
And I am Luke.
And Luke, it is officially upon us. Regular season football will kick off this week. The games count. The guys are rested. The teams have been culled to their regular season size of 53 players. Are you excited?
I'm extremely excited, Tim. It's always the most interesting part of the season in some ways is before it begins, where anything is possible. There's a blank slate. Team from 1 to 32 think they could win the Super Bowl. Within about 7 or 8 days, probably half those teams will go, well, we suck. So
and it'll be that fast too.
Hope.
Nobody's mediocre week one. You're either going to win the Super Bowl or the season is over.
I look forward very much to the massive overreactions to week one performances because I think those are always really good. I didn't have time this week to dig up. Maybe I'll do it for next week. Dig up some of the week one takes from last year. It's always like one quarterback plays exceptionally well and everyone goes, oh, maybe this is the year for, X guy to take a step forward or become the next Patrick Mahomes or something. And it's seldom true. I'm reminded often, Tim, I've mentioned this on an earlier pod before, during the season, we'll be handing out the Jonas Gray Memorial Player of the Week teaspoon. So, person who does absolutely nothing and then out of the clear blue sky does amazingly. I was a proponent of calling it the Kevin Ogletree Memorial Teaspoon. Kevin Ogletree, reason I mentioned him, week one of whatever season it was with the Cowboys, went crazy for 100 and some odd yards and 3 touchdowns, and fantasy pickups across the land were laid at the feet of Kevin Ogletree, who then proceeded to do absolutely nothing. So buyer beware, I would say, on week one. But I'm very excited. I'm very much looking forward to football starting and my Sundays being spent in a reclined pose for the next 6-ish months. Always pleasant.
Yeah, I saw a TikTok video this week of a guy handing in his resignation to his wife, saying, I've been a good husband and father for the last several months, but unfortunately I no longer have time to fulfill those duties any further. I will no longer be available on Sundays from 10 a.m. to midnight, Mondays from 7 p.m. to midnight, and Thursdays from 7 p.m. to midnight, and sometimes Saturday. So just get ready.
You should have a podcast because that means it takes up even more of your time.
Our significant others love us very much.
Yeah, we will be with you throughout the season, fear not listenership. So look forward to joining you and talking about all the whys and wherefores. Today, we're going to preview said season, which has yet to begin, which will no doubt be a series of 100% accurate predictions, guaranteed to be wrong or your money back. But before we get into the nitty gritty, let us just say to you, if you are listening to us on the podcast app, find us on the podcast app you are listening to us on, the Half Yard Line podcast. Subscribe to it, like it, leave it a rating and a review. We much appreciate it. You can also find us on all of the socials at Half Yard Line Pod. You can find us on YouTube, Half Yard Line Pod as well. If you want to see our
beautiful faces.
If you've been wondering which one of us is which, or maybe before it begins, you can just pause it, look at the split screen and think who you think is Tim and who you think is Luke and see if you're right. Answers on a postcard. Hit us up on the socials. You can find us on Threads, which I'm going to keep mentioning until it officially goes down in flames, although it nearly has, and on X. So if you're listening to us in 2025 and you're thinking, what is X? I'm doing the X thing. It was called Twitter once.
It was.
But now it's not. Anyway, you can do all those things. That would be great. Look forward to you joining us throughout the season. But Tim, the season itself offers so much hope to so many teams and people and fans. You're a fan of a team which has always been fairly good. I've been a fan of a team which has been awful and good. So very much different approaches to the off seasons, I feel like, in the last 20 or so years. But you got any overarching thoughts on the season yet to come, or just general takes on what you expect, what unexpected things you expect to happen, I suppose, in the season? Because as we know, the NFL tends to flip-flop around a crazy amount year on year.
Yeah, so I, as a Steeler fan, there are certain things that the beginning of every season brings that I loathe. So the fan base expects to win the Super Bowl absolutely every year. It doesn't matter if we have a rookie quarterback. It doesn't matter if, we've just lost 4 Hall of Fame defensive players. It doesn't matter if we have, won the division, lost the division. The expectation is every year we were this close, and really we should have won it last year, but so-and-so didn't. Next year's our year. Every year we're supposed to win the Super Bowl. That's never realistic. Even the teams that win the Super Bowl, that's not the expectation. It's the hope, right? Tiger Woods, who's won more golf tournaments than anybody who's ever lived, would say, look, all I'm doing is trying to give myself a shot on Sunday to win as many of these stupid things as I can. And if you keep giving yourself chances, that's going to turn up in your favor. And that's the way the NFL is. You got to give yourself a chance. Give yourself a chip and a chair in the playoffs. Try to peak late, get healthy. Lord knows what can happen. And, if you're very fortunate, you can do that for a couple of decades and win 4 or 5. If you're, less fortunate, you get it every 4 or 5 or 6 years, you get a chance in the playoffs, and you got to make the most of those chances. The teams that do, you end up being Eli Manning, right? He had 2 real good seasons in his career, won 2 Super Bowls. The rest of them turned into Peyton Manning, who was good every single year, won 2 Super Bowls. So, you got to make the most of those chances when you get them. And I think fans of franchises like the Steelers, like the Patriots, like the Cowboys, who have these multiple title type reputations, it's very hard to think about it that way. And so that's always frustrating for me as a Steeler fan. The other thing that's frustrating for me as a Steelers fan is this year we're on the hype train a little bit. And I hate the preseason hype train regardless of who it's following. But this year it's us.
Not a big fan of that one, are you?
No. And this idea that Kenny Pickett looked great on like 12 dropbacks against vanilla defenses playing their second stringers.
Yeah. I also like when they do the camp puff pieces are great, like social media's impact on training camps, where people are now charting, he was 13 for 13 in today's practice period. It's like, it's not a game. Like, nope. It's not a game. The number of things, every rookie quarterbacks is usually the worst. I'm sure you had it last year with Pickett, right? But this year it's Anthony Richardson or CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. Pick your QB rookie of choice.
Shocker.
Anthony Richardson has had a tremendous camp. It's like, where do you think this news is coming from? Is it coming from the coaching staff that wants him to look good? Like, do you give him confidence? It's so predictable. Devontae Parker, now with the Patriots, formerly of the Dolphins, for years. I mean, if there was a preseason hype player Hall of Fame, he would be right in there. I mean, he's been a good player in his NFL career, had some flashy years, but every year, Devontae Parker is going to break out this season. Every single year for like 5 years in a row. He's a good player, but he never did. And this year, I think that player is Calvin Ridley, right? I think you and I have spoken about this off air, so to speak. He's looked amazing in camp. It's like, can we just wait and see if he looks any good, given he hasn't played football in 2 years? Like, it's always absurd. So I do enjoy that. And the Steelers have had some notable puff pieces this year, which is unusual for you, I feel like, because usually it's like, well, the Steelers will be good because they're always good.
I have one of these Amazon Echo Show little screen things in my kitchen for reasons that are unclear to me, other than it came out and there was a Christmas, and so I'm sure somebody bought it. But, I was walking by and it said, Steelers have a flawless offseason, ? And it linked to a video
what does that even mean?
2 talking heads like you and I, explaining how the Steelers literally did everything to the best possible maximum that they could, like, literally could not have had a better offseason than they had. And if they are not competing for the Super Bowl, the only reason will be injuries, because the team could not be constructed better. And all I could do was say, what? So the offensive line was meh. We got new ones, therefore, hey, they're going to be great. Yeah. Or maybe they'll also be terrible.
Titans are in the same boat. It's like, the new offensive line looks good. It's like, well, it can't surely look much worse than it was a year ago. So we hope so, because if not, everyone on the offense will be killed. But I do like those. The offseason hype pieces, I think second only in my least favorite offseason storylines about teams, which is that people just think, well, this happened last year, so we'll just go with that. Like, teams will just continue to be good. If they were good in this case, 2022, they'll be good in 2023. The Super Bowl hangover teams were always great value for this, right? Like, they went to the Super Bowl and lost, but next year, they'll be back. Or sometimes the ridiculous thing of like, they'll be back several times. It's like, teams don't go back several times in short time periods, apart from very limited exceptions. Patriots, for example, Steelers have done it, similar players, at least with Roethlisberger and Chiefs. It's rare, right? That's kind of the point. So no one seems to remember that 2 years ago this wasn't happening. And on that note, Tim, I promised you before we started this podcast I'd have a quiz question for you, because I know you enjoy them. Right. So I thought
I peaked last week on the trivia. Okay, I'm not sure.
You did great. You did great. But let's keep this train a rolling. And we're going to be talking today on the pod, division by division, who we think is going to win, who's going to make the
Yeah.
playoffs, all that jazz. So I decided to look up who won the divisions for the last several years. Now, 2022 just happened, so I'm kind of putting that to one side. But so I decided to go back a couple of years and just to give people an idea, because I think we have short memories, right? This new season begins, we're excited,
100%.
we forget what happened 3 years ago. So I went back to 2020 originally, but then 2020 was the COVID year, so kind of a weird, anomalous year in a lot of different ways, although you could use it. It's in 2019, the NFL season of 2019. Division winners in 2019. How many of these do you think you can name?
I think I can name 6, but we'll see.
There's a couple of layups, but I'm interested to see how many. So
we're going back to the Peyton. We're going back to the Tom Brady Patriots at that point. So the Patriots won the East.
The Patriots won the East.
The 2019 Steelers were 8-8 after a lackluster start. So that would have been. Oh, it's pre-Burrow, so it must have been the Ravens. That
was the Ravens.
Was that the MVP year for Lamar?
Yeah, that was the number 1 seed year where the Titans beat them in the game at the M&T Bank.
Right.
Yeah, it was.
We were there.
Yeah, that was the one.
All right. So, gosh, the South. I mean, the Titans didn't win the division that year. So, because they were the 6th seed, 7th seed, whatever the bottom seed was that year.
It was 6. It was still 16 games. That's how long ago this was. But yes.
Yeah. So that would have been not the Titans. So it would have to be the Deshaun Watson Texans.
It was the Houston Texans. Yes.
And the Chiefs, obviously, in the West. So that's
the Chiefs.
AFC. Now, keep in mind, I'm an AFC fan.
That's 4 for 4, Tim. I'm interested to see how many of these you get.
Oh, God. The East, the NFC East. So, gosh, who was even playing quarterback for the Eagles? The Cowboys were bad.
Yeah.
The Giants.
I didn't even get into who was playing because that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Were bad. I mean, everybody was bad. I would guess the Cowboys won the East.
It was the Philadelphia Eagles, Tim, in 2019.
Really?
Okay. It was under I believe under the stewardship of Carson Wentz at that time, if memory serves.
The
NFC South.
That must have been a blah year. Okay. NFC South would have been Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints.
It was the Saints. West.
I mean, it's either the Niners or the Seahawks, right? So
it was either the Niners or the Seahawks. That's correct.
It's the Niners. It's got to be the Niners.
It was the 49ers who played in the NFC Championship game that year against the number 1 team from the North, who I think you would get anyway.
Oh, the Packers. Yeah, obviously.
The Packers.
Yep.
So
7 out of 8.
Well, yeah, 7 out of 8. So just to recap, so in 2019,
it's the COVID thing.
In 2019, the division winners were New England, Houston, Kansas City, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New Orleans, San Francisco, and Green Bay. Those were the 8 division winners. Fast forward 2 years, the winners were the Bills, the Titans, the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Cowboys, the Buccaneers, the Rams, and the Packers again. So
exactly the same teams, right? Exactly the same. No.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much commonality there. It's untrue. I mean, there's some commonality, but it just shows you how much changes. Yeah. Players move teams, right? Teams change coaches. And even when nothing that dramatic happens, teams that win divisions don't stack division wins year on year that much. I think people have those short memories. If you told someone in 2018, if you're a Bills fan going, oh, by the way, you're going to start winning a division, they'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, Tom Brady's going to live forever, so we're never going to win anything. All of that is to say, when we do these predictions momentarily, a lot is going to change, and a lot of it will change that we can't predict, whether that's injury, whether that's luck, whether that's something else. But I think there were some predictable flukes in 2022. So I think with that in mind, Tim, shall we launch ahead into who we think is winning each of these NFL divisions?
Yes, I think we should.
Excellent. We'll start. Why don't we start in the local area let's start with the AFC East. We're AFC fans. We'll start in the AFC. Tim, how do you have this one shaken out in 2023? As a reminder, the Bills won it last year.
Yeah, and I think they do again. This is, call it short-term memory, call it what you will. I still think the best quarterback in that division is in Buffalo. Josh Allen obviously is key to the success there in Buffalo. People are concerned often about Josh Allen's health. The way he plays the game does not lend itself to not being hurt. He, he takes a lot of hits,
right.
and people have been trying to get him to take less hits, slide more. But that's a big part of his game. It's always been a big part of his game, and be interesting to see if he's interested in it not being a big part of his game going forward. So health is obviously always a big asterisk, but I think the Bills have the best offense. I think they have one of the best defenses in the division as well. So I've got Buffalo at the top of that. If you want to give me if you want me to give you my standings all the way down, I've actually got Bills, Pats, Dolphins, Jets. Don't hate me, New York.
Whoa,
spicy. That's the way I see it. Yeah.
You have the Patriots as the second best team in this division.
I do. I don't.
You must be the only person.
I don't believe in. Listen. I don't believe in. Do the Patriots have a starting quarterback right now? I feel like they fired everybody in that room.
McCorkle, Mac Jones.
McCorkle's there. We'll see. I think Bill Belichick is not bad at this game. I think people forget the Patriots were 8-9 in 2022. They weren't.
Yeah.
4
and they were pretty bad,
15,
to be honest.
It wasn't the number of games there are.
It wasn't a pretty 8-9 either. Bailey Zappi started some games; they just cut him. It was a rough go.
That's right. But and listen, I'm not forecasting them to be great. Here's what I'll tell you: the way I just read it, Bills, Pats, Dolphins, Jets. That's their point differential in order last year. Bills at plus 169, Pats at plus 17, Dolphins at -2, Jets at -20. So before you all run off and tell me how hateful I am, that's the chalk. That's what came down last year. So we'll see.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't have that. So for you, we starting well here. So I have a different thought on this. The Bills have had three divisions in a row, right? So you've got them winning 4 straight. I think the Bills are a team I am picking to backslide this year.
Ooh.
Now, I still think they're going to be a playoff. I still think they're a playoff team. I don't dispute that. Josh Allen's great. They've been so reliant on Josh Allen year in and year out. We've spoken on in-season pods, off-season pods about the complete over-reliance on his specific skills. It's very similar to the Cam Newton situation in Carolina. Okay, they have got some better players surrounding him, but there's not enough of them. In this offseason, we thought, finally, are they going to stop being Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen show? They drafted Dalton Kincaid. Listen, he's a very promising prospect. Rookie tight ends tend to struggle. He's another offseason camp puff piece.
They are worthless.
Darling. He's also not even the starting tight end of his own team because Dawson Knox is there. Again, he's a good player. They brought in Damian Harris. He's a good player. You'd hope he takes some of the goal line work off Josh Allen because I feel like those hits really start to add up. They've always had a good defense. They're a well-coached team. They have scored a lot of points historically. I still think they're going to be good, but I don't think they're going to win the division. I have Miami winning this division. So the Dolphins, a lot of this is going to come down to Tua Tagovailoa being healthy for the full 16. I keep wanting to say 16 games. Full 17 games. We'll get there eventually. Give me 10 years. I have Tua leading the Finns to a division crown. I very much like the construction of the offense. I like Mike McDaniel's offensive scheme. The defense was very good before and has had some continuity because even though Flores left, they kept some of the staff around. I think Miami is a step forward team this year. So I have it stacked as Miami, Buffalo, Jets, New England. Now, I think in the terms of the AFC, I actually think this is the best division in the conference. Top to bottom, I would say this is the best. I know the Jets brought over Aaron.
Are a crazy person.
I know the Jets brought over Aaron Rodgers. We did a Down to the Franchise pod last week. I don't have the Jets making the playoffs. It's not because Aaron Rodgers isn't good. I can't really get beyond that the downtroddenness of the Jets. The Patriots, I don't really see. I can understand that they win games. I think they have one mechanism to win games, which is make them really difficult to watch. And they did that very well last year, and they went 8-9. I don't really see how much better they are than they were last year, unless Mac Jones gets a lot better than he was. I'm not really that bullish on them. I think they might be like a 500-ish team again, and I think the Jets will probably be a 500-ish, maybe 9-win team. But that was my pick this year. I could pick the Bills, is the easy route, but I decided to pick Miami because, why not? So have at it.
You're a crazy person. I mean, an absolute crazy person. You got to remember, this is Miami is a team that not 2 seasons ago had Tua Tagovailoa as an option, and every time a game got close, they pulled him and put in Magic
but that was
Fitzpatrick.
stupid.
Okay,
and he was
my
also
point
he was a
is,
rookie,
it wasn't
right?
like,
So it's a different kettle of fish. It's not the same as he is right now.
Stop it.
They've got
Stop it.
they've got a great. I think they've got a really exciting offense here, and I think when Tua played last year, I thought the Dolphins looked really, really good. Now, of course, if he doesn't play, I think this falls apart. But I'm going to back Tua to have a big year, and I'm going to back Dolphins to win the division because not everyone can win the division. They won it last year, so why not someone else in the East? Because I think Buffalo is going to be a little bit worse than they were.
Tua looked really, really good for like 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Not enough for me. It's just not. Maybe he's great. The number of quarterbacks who go from being meh to great are very, very small. Very, very small. And generally it's because something magic happened. And last year it was Tyreek Hill shows up into town and everybody's like, oh, well, he's going to be tough to cover. And then they're like, oh, Jalen Waddle apparently pretty good too. And so they threw long balls to Tyreek Hill and they threw long balls to Jalen Waddle. I don't believe for a minute that if they come out and do that again in 2023, teams are going to go, oh, what do we do now?
Well,
like you schemed like that. Nobody expected that coming out last year.
No, but they also threw a lot of like short area passes. I think there's so many ways to get those guys the ball to score points because they can score from anywhere. That's kind of the thing. Tyreek Hill had like a banner season last year, and I think it went kind of under the radar because I think most of the discussion around Miami was about Tua having concussion problems. I don't want to say problems, having concussions, which is unfortunate. I just think they're a team that could step forward. The Jets, neither of us have them in the top 2 in this division, correct? You have them third. Is that you have them third behind New England?
I do.
So maybe just a word on the Jets.
No, I'm sorry. I have the Jets last. I have the Jets last.
You have the Jets last.
Fourth, yeah. I think
that's so painful.
I've got the Jets winning 4 games this year.
That is scorchingly scalding of a take. 4 games.
4 games.
Wow. Salah would be gone. They've got a really good defense. They have got some promising offensive pieces like Garrett Wilson. They have the defensive rookie of the year as well.
Can I
please?
For a minute? All right. Their first game's the Bills at home. Aaron Rodgers getting his first taste in New York football. The Bills have had a history of coming out in week 1. I think they rectify that. Bills win that game going away. Then they got to go to Dallas with whatever Dallas can be, but whatever they can be certainly is difficult to play at home. And then they get to come home and play the Patriots. So I've got them best case 1 and 2 after week 3. Then they've got Chiefs at Broncos, and Broncos aren't great, but this is at Broncos, and then back home for the Eagles on quote unquote on the road at the Giants. This team may have 1 win, maybe 2 by the time they get to a week 9 matchup against the Chargers. I'm just telling you, it could fall apart quickly for the Jets. They have a tough schedule. They're playing tough teams. They, overachieved a little bit last year. Offensive rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year. Listen, maybe they're the next super team and they whoop all of them. But if it doesn't go well early for the Jets, watch out for the New York media. Watch out for the Boo Birds. Watch out for a really uncomfortable situation for Aaron Rodgers. And if he gets up on the podium in New York and spells the word relax, it's going to be a rough go for my dear friends in the Kelly Green.
Wow.
Telling you.
Brutal. You're going to be there, Tim.
Look
week
out.
1 official half-yard line correspondent in the week 1 Buffalo Bills.
I will. I will be at the Bills Jets game in MetLife, watching,
booing loudly from the sounds of it.
Well, I'm going with New York fans, so I'll behave myself.
That's the East. So that was sufficiently controversial. So hopefully this is all chalky here on out. Why don't we go to the South, Tim? A division close to my heart. You went first last time. I'll go first. I have my standings as follows. It will surprise you not 1% that I have the Titans winning this division.
Shocker.
I have the Jags second. I have the Colts third, and then Houston. To be honest, that's a complete coin flip. Like, I have no idea really how good either of those teams is going to be. I went with the Colts because I think they have slightly more talent. I do really like D'Amico Ryans, but he's also never been a head coach. Shane Steichen's coming in for the Colts. He's never been a head coach. They're both starting rookies from week 1. Like, these guys could kind of go a bit anywhere. I just think the Colts have a few better players. I will say that. They have loads of them, and one of the best ones doesn't want to play for them anymore. But they have a few, so I'm just going to say Houston and Colts, we can kind of put them to one side unless you have strong disagreement around that, because I just think they're both going to be pretty terrible. The Titans over the Jags, I'll give my quick spiel, and I'll throw it to you so I don't just talk about my own team for ages. The Titans last year should have won this division, should have comfortably won this division, went on a horrendous losing streak to end the season, losing 7 straight from an absurd position of strength. They had injuries out the wazoo for the second consecutive year, including, most notably, the quarterback Ryan Tannehill, who sure isn't Joe Montana, but when he's out there, the team is unsurprisingly a lot better. They won with, they nearly beat the Chiefs with Malik Willis, which was ridiculous. And they just went on a terrible run where they were starting Malik Willis, then they were starting Josh Dobbs, and it just wasn't like there was nothing there offensively, and it's not exactly a great offensive team to begin with. New offensive coordinator Tim Kelly brought in DeAndre Hopkins. I know they're not necessarily needle movers for a lot of people. I think they are. I think if the offensive line plays better and the injury bug doesn't bite, I think the team as a whole is very good. The defense is going to be really good this year, I think. The Jags are a hype team, darling, and they won the division last year. They won the division because the Titans lost it. They didn't win it because the Jags won it, in my opinion, although they did great, and they obviously had the crazy comeback against the Chargers. I just don't think they're going to be as good as people assume they are going to be. They feel very much like a team that was very good for 1 year, or at least was good for 1 year, then maybe has to learn how to win a little bit differently as teams play them maybe a bit tougher. You're a first place team, you have a tougher schedule. It's very different. The Titans were playing the Chiefs last year. They were playing the Bengals last year. They were playing the Bills last year. The Jags didn't really have to do that. So I think it's a whole different ball game when you're coming in as numero uno. I think Jags take a step back, and I think the Titans just kind of hold probably steady at that sort of 10 win-ish mark. But I do think that's enough to win the division. They've had a good record against the division, and I think they're going to win the AFC South this year, which will bring me great joy. What say you?
Luke, I'm going to make you a little unhappy here, I think.
Colts win the division? Is that what you're going to go?
I had the Titans easily winning this division up until I started preparing for this episode.
Okay.
One of the things.
Go on, give it to me.
Yeah.
Give me the pain.
So one of the things that concerns me was when I look at teams and I look at last year's performance. I'm a big points differential guy, and the Titans found some creative ways to lose games last year. They absolutely fell apart.
Almost every way possible.
Yeah, and they absolutely fell apart down the stretch. Lost 7 in a row. Same effort, by the way, the Colts managed to put up in their last 7. But what concerns me about the Titans was their total point differential last year was negative 61. Their 298 points scored was on par with the New York Jets. It was lower than the likes of the Arizona Cardinals, the Commanders, the Bears. They're not scoring a lot of points, and they're giving up a fair number, a little above average, to end up with a negative 61 point differential. The Jags last year, who I would have thought statistically were reasonably comparable to the Titans, just sort of a switcheroo, right? The Titans lost their last 7, the Jags won their last 5, and the Jags stole the division, including obviously a late season game yet again where they beat you when you had no reason to lose to them. But
they starting a street free agent quarterback wasn't probably the best way to win that game, I would say. We still should have won, which is saying a lot.
Minus 61, they were plus 54. Minus 61 to plus 50. Their Pythagorean wins expectation was between 10 and 11, and they won 9. Yours was between 4 and 5, and you won 7. So it's almost like they actually were a little unlucky last year relative to the way they performed, and you guys actually may have been a touch lucky. So I don't, we're still friends.
No,
I'm gonna root for your Titans. I think, unfortunately, the Jags. We'll see. They added some what I'm going to call high volatility pieces in the offseason. They could certainly get sideways for the Jags, get sideways for anybody. But at this point, in one of the worst divisions in football, I have the Jags, in that kind of 9-10 game. I've got the Titans in sort of the 7-9 win range. And then I've got the Colts and the Texans fighting to see who gets the first pick in the draft.
Yeah, I will say 2 quick things in defense of my own team, and then we can move on so I don't have a complete pity party. as I mentioned, I think the points differential is valid. I would say there's probably three major things that I would mention. Number one, not having your starting quarterback and not even having really a serviceable NFL starter play about half the games last year will not help you. Malik Willis clearly was not ready to play football. The team shielded him as best it could, and then I think the defense towards the end of the season just got exhausted from being on the field constantly. Started Josh Dobbs, who is now backing up in Cleveland, I think. But he's a backup type player. Like if we'd had a serviceable NFL quarterback, not even a great NFL quarterback, like a bottom 10 starter level, we would have won the division last year. The second thing I mentioned is the offensive line last year was absolutely criminal, like criminally bad. Now, a lot rides on new pieces, obviously drafting offensive linemen early, free agents, etc. I get it. It's a sauce we can't predict how it will taste, but we hope it will be better. The third, and I think the most important thing of all, and you know this well because I complain to you about it all the time, we had, in my opinion, the worst offensive coordinator in the league in Todd Downing, who was really a terrible game manager, would do stuff like we'd run on first down every single time, regardless of the box. We had a great success rate throwing on first down. We never did it. It was run on first down, run on second down, throw on third down. It's not a recipe for success in the modern NFL. And I think just that change maybe freshens things up. Now, you're 100% right in that the Titans are probably going to have to win games in an uglier fashion than the Jags. The Jags look to be a more high-flying team, and I think they won quite a few blowouts last year, which contributed to that positive points differential you mentioned. But I would just say to people, this is my last point, I promise. Remember how good the Titans were before they were absolutely ravaged by the worst injury record in the NFL 2 years in a row. Because the answer is they were division champs, and I think they have the best coach in this division too. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to defend the Titans anymore. Well, you have the Jags winning this division,
Luke,
and I have Tennessee. There's just difference of opinion.
Here's the problem. Three years ago doesn't make a hill of beans difference. It's different players.
Yeah.
It's a different coaching staff, with the exception of a different offensive coaching staff. It's different conditions, different players on the other side.
Yeah.
2 years ago, 3 years ago, how
good
the head coach means nothing.
Who's the head coach? Who's the head coach?
That's Vrabel. Mike Vrabel is the head coach.
Right.
How many Super Bowls has he won? I don't
know. None as of yet, but maybe this year will be different. Anyway, we'll move on from the South. Now I can. Now this would be where I say let's pivot to the North, so I can shit on Pittsburgh. But unfortunately, I won't be doing that. Tim,
I'll handle that.
You can give your spiel about who is going to win the AFC North, and how do you have this stacked this year?
Yeah, hot take number 2.
Watching.
You ready? So I am going to put the Cincinnati Bengals on top of this division and just be prepared to take the wet noodle lashings that come with that. I don't believe the Steelers are that much better than they were last year. If I hear one more thing about Mike Tomlin's non-losing season streak, I'm going to jump out a window.
Yeah.
We were 38 points below average, or below even last year. We gave up 38 more points than we scored. We were holding that thing together with duct tape and baling wire. Mike Tomlin deserves every penny they pay him. I get all that. That's not a recipe for competing for a championship. Do we sneak into the playoffs? Maybe. I think the AFC is down this year. The South is atrocious. I think the West takes a step back from what was already a step back beyond expectations last year. The East, I think it's the Bills and everybody else. So, there's 3 wild cards available in this conference. Could the Steelers sneak into one of them at 9-8 or 10-7? Sure, they could. But the Bengals are probably going to win this division if they stay healthy. They have the best wide receiver in the division. They have one of the better running backs in the division. They probably have the best, certainly the most proven at this point. Sorry, Steeler fans. We'll see what Kenny Pickett can do in the regular season against defenses that are scheming to stop him before we declare him the second coming of whoever. But yeah, so I'm going to go Joe Burrow and the Bengals to top the division. I will say the Steelers slide in at second. I have the Cleveland Browns at third. And I have the Dirty Birds going down in a flaming cauldron of sulfur and brimstone.
I kind of knew you were going to do this, but I'm enjoying it anyway.
Listen, every time in my lifetime the Ravens have gotten good, and they've got a quarterback that they fall in love with, that everybody else goes, I don't know. they blow up. It's never been a quarterback-driven team. Joe Flacco obviously got him to and won a Super Bowl. Great, Joe. Excellent. Wonderful job. But on the whole, I don't see it. Lamar Jackson hasn't been particularly good in the postseason. I think him holding out, in my opinion, at the end of last year because they didn't want to pay him, and he was playing, the whole tag thing and injuries and guaranteed contracts.
And it's been such a tumultuous offseason with that looming over the result. I know eventually it ended kind of all's well ends well, but it has been a weird, rocky journey for the last year or so. He
still didn't get what he wanted. Like, the whole thing was the Ravens paid more than they wanted to pay, and they still didn't keep him happy. So, like, at the end of the day, is he riding into town now going, all right, I'm happy? No, he's riding into town going, I'm obviously getting paid a lot of money, but with a chip on his shoulder at the same time over what he had to do to get it and how long the team made him wait for it and what the final contract looked like. Plus, I continue to – and listen, I'm not one of these people who says Lamar Jackson's a running back. I understand he's got an arm. Don't hear me to say I think Lamar Jackson's a bad quarterback. I think Lamar Jackson's game is dependent on him being the best athlete on the field, because one of the reasons he is able to throw the ball in the way that he does is because people are afraid to come and try to get him in the backfield sometimes when their responsibility is containment, because if he runs around him, then he's going to run for 50 yards. If he's not the best athlete on the field anymore, that's no longer the case. He doesn't have as much time in the pocket. People play him differently. They scheme him differently. You've seen it when he was hobbled, right? When he's not 100%, teams aren't as afraid of him. And I think you'll see that a lot as he gets older. He's coming off an injury, lest we forget. The last 2 years, he didn't finish the season. Their play with him and without him, obviously demonstrably different. Can he stay healthy? If he's healthy, is he happy? Seems to be one of these players who needs to be positive in the press all the time. People need to tell him how wonderful he is. He needs to read his name on the
big
Insta.
Trust, Tim. We need big trust is what we need, I believe. That was the phrase of choice, was not.
Blah, 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 blah. I don't care what they call it these days. What he really wants is to be coddled and told how wonderful he is by everyone who talks to him. And, listen, there's a lot of football players. Lamar Jackson's one of many in that boat.
Yes.
I think it was Deshaun Watson in this very division who was just caught blocking people who didn't even follow it. Like, they didn't even mention him in the comments, like searching his name on Twitter.
Kevin Durant sort of situation. No, I agree.
Yeah.
So for what it's worth,
so there you go. Steelers are second behind the Bengals, then the Browns, then the Ravens.
Yeah, I actually have it fairly similarly. I mean, I think the Browns are on my list of sneaky terrible teams for this year because A, it's the Browns, and B, I really don't have any reason to suspect. No, well, yeah, I just mean it seems to be like, well, people will say Deshaun Watson year two, but I'm not buying it. I have the Browns in the cellar again, which doesn't bring me a huge amount of joy because it feels like punching down. But saying that as a Titans fan, that's pretty rough when a Titans fan feels like they're punching down on your team. But I have the Bengals winning as well. A couple of years ago, we had a long conversation before this pod even began about the Bengals being somewhat fortunate in how they got to where they ended up, which was the Super Bowl, turnover luck and so on. I think since then they've got a lot better. The offense is just so good. Like, Burrow is obviously brilliant. Chase is brilliant. T. Higgins is brilliant. Tyler Boyd's a very good, dependable option. They brought in Irv Smith Jr., who might, I think, have a pretty good year as the starting tight end in that offense. Whether Mixon's any good is really, I don't want to say irrelevant, but it's more of a nice to have at this point. And they brought in Orlando Brown Jr., who's obviously should solidify the offensive line, which has been a sieve pretty much ever since Burrow got there. I have the Steelers second as well. I have the Ravens third, and I have the Browns fourth. The Ravens, I'll just mention it quickly. You kind of touched on a lot of the same things. I think a lot of the same things. I just don't have them being as bad. I think they have enough to kind of hover around being okay. My main reason is I just can't bank on Lamar Jackson playing every game. He's been injured, as you mentioned, the last 2 years. It's a huge drop-off. It's a huge drop. I know Tyler Huntley made the Pro Bowl, LOL, but it's not the same. This offense requires a fully healthy, dangerous, thrilling Lamar Jackson to be any good whatsoever. I know they brought in Todd Monken as the new offensive coordinator. There was a lot of carping about Greg Roman and how crap he was and holding people back. I remember hearing this with Russell Wilson too, by the way, and that worked out super well. So I just think Lamar's not going to play enough games. I think if he stayed healthy for all 17 games, I'd probably have Baltimore in the playoffs. But I don't think he will. And I don't really think this whole chat about, they added Odell Beckham. It's like, what are we talking about this now? Like, is this really going to make any difference? I like Zay Flowers. I think he's going to be a good pro. I don't really buy why they're going to be much better. I'll quickly touch on the Steelers because
Sure.
I feel like you didn't mention them that much, which is interesting as a fan, but maybe that was intentional because I rambled about Titans for 20 minutes. I think the Steelers will be good this year because the team is very good. How good did the Steelers then go from that point becomes the Kenny Pickett question, which is open, right? But you can't say he's not got the weapons around him. He's got as much help as you could possibly give him. You brought in Allen Robinson, who may or may not be a superstar at this point in his career, but is a very good seasoned NFL pro. Pickens looks like he's going to be great, although if he could ever make a catch where he didn't have to use one fingernail and a tooth to grab it, that would be good. Deontay Johnson's a very good player. I think Najee Harris is going to have a good year despite all of the trash talking around his career being over and all this. I think the Steelers will be good. Defense will be really good again. I have the Steelers in the playoffs. I have the Ravens missing out, and I have the Browns last. But I think it's Cincinnati's division, and I think they win it pretty comfortably come season's end.
We got to move on, but real quick on the Browns, to support your position a little bit, we talk about puff pieces in the offseason. This was a perfect offseason for the Deshaun Watson puff piece. There haven't been that many.
Yeah.
The Deshaun Watson puff piece that I saw this week was about, the players voted him one of 5 captains. Oh, well, he is the starter.
Oh, because a quarterback being a captain obviously means he's going to have a great career. Because no quarterback's ever been ridiculous. I hate those captain.
The team respects
you should
him. No, stop it.
Yeah.
Just stop it.
I agree.
But listen, so
I think Stefanski's going to get fired by the middle of the season.
Probably. But the reason I still have the Ravens below them is I look at this depth chart and I see 2 things that concern me. 1, Lamar Jackson. We talked about the fall off to Tyler Huntley. 2, running back is just a bleh. Like J.K. Dobbins never took off. Gus Edwards has been fun, but not spectacular. They don't
Gus
have
Bus.
Gus the Bus. There you go. Their wide receiver room is Odell Beckham Jr. and then Odell Beckham Jr., mind you, hasn't been any good since. He was good in L.A. with 900 other wide receivers. He was good in New York when I was in college. I feel like that was eons ago. He was terrible in between there, and he missed all of last year hurt. What's he going to be? I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. And so you look down there and you're like, all right, so you've got OBJ who's but he's going to lose his mind the first time he's running free. Lamar doesn't see him and instead takes off and scampers for a 37-yard first down. He's going to be in Lamar's helmet going, throw me the ball, throw me the ball, throw me the damn ball. And Lamar's going to be like, I just ran for 40 yards.
Yeah, and even more than that, maybe, some of the standard receiver diva-ness, which does come along with him to a great or lesser extent. You just can't be thinking he's going to be wide receiver 1. Like, you just cannot be banking on that at this point. He's had a lot of injury problems. He's played well in spurts, really, since he left New York. I mean, since then, it's been a whole lot of what if with Odell, right? The Browns, that never really worked. Obviously, with the late, he was
one
good.
Really cool pass over his head.
Yeah, he was phenomenal when he started his career, but so a lot of other players. So I just think you can't be banking on him, and I agree. Zay Flowers, like I say, I do really like him, and I think that was a great pick for them. But year 1, is he going to be, the guy? And I just think the offense isn't going to provide enough without Lamar running the ball. And I think the injuries, unfortunately, will start to take a toll because he's not the biggest heavyset dude in the world, and it's such an explosive movement that he requires as an athlete. So yeah, I have the Ravens third as well. Third instead of fourth, but yes, third instead of fourth.
All right, so let's talk about the
AFC West. I'll go first. I think this is really, really simple, and I'm just going to read the teams in order, and then you can agree or disagree. Kansas City's going to win division again. Stop me if you've heard that before. This, I think, will be 8 in a row. It's going to happen. Pack your bags for the playoffs, or in this case, don't, because you'll probably be hosting again. I have the Chargers second again. I have the Las Vegas Raiders in third, and I have the Denver Broncos dead last. I will give you 2 seconds on each of these teams, and then I'll pass it over to you, and you can extrapolate.
Hit me.
The Denver Broncos are going to be fairly good on defense, although I think not as good, which I think is going to be a big problem. And I think they are going to be significantly crapper on offense than everyone is predicting they will be. The Raiders are going to be more of the same, which is middle of the pack and middle of the pack. Jimmy G is fine. Jimmy G is okay. Jimmy G is a great looking human being, but I don't think he's a great NFL quarterback, and he's going to steer the ship, but he can't steer it much further than it went with Derek Carr, in my opinion, despite the skill talent that they have on that team. The Chargers are going to Charger, as I believe the meme would have it, which means they will be very good in spurts. They will find some very creative and hilarious ways to lose a few more games than they should. I'm not sold on the coach, but I am a big fan of the Kellen Moore hire there on the offensive side of the ball. I think that was a good get for them and a kind of surprising situation that he sort of landed in their lap. So I think that was smart. And I have them making the playoffs, and I have the Chiefs winning the division. So that's the AFC West. And I think for me, it's a pretty cut and dry and fairly simple diagnosis for 2023.
Yeah. So the only thing I'm going to disagree with you on is, well, I won't disagree. I have them in the same order. I think Chargers and Raiders are closer than you do. I think the Raiders improve year over year. I think there was just a lot of baggage the way that team was structured. I think Devontae Adams and Derek Carr obviously had a great relationship, but I think it was tough for them to come in and try to put it together on that football team. I think getting a fresh start at the quarterback position is always a two-edged sword. That can vindicate or can decapitate. And I think we'll see.
Nicely put.
We'll see which way it goes here. But, I think Jimmy G has been unspectacular but consistent everywhere he's ever been. To be clear, the Las Vegas Raiders are not the San Francisco 49ers. He is not going to be put in a position like he was there to kind of hold the show together and just go out and not screw it up. He's going to have to do some stuff. But I think he's got the talent to do so. I do believe the Raiders are better this year than they were last year. I don't think they're better enough to catch the Chargers. I think, obviously, pretty good little signal caller down there in Los Angeles that I ultimately think is the difference. And I also have them in the playoffs. Ever since Drew Brees got hurt, when people will forget he played for the Chargers when they were in San Diego, that team has managed to be good, not great, basically every year since then. We talk about short memories. It's watch on repeat how the Chargers are good. They're good. They have a good quarterback. They have a good offense. They have good wide receivers. Injuries are always a problem for them. Their top two wide receivers, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, find ways to be hurt all the time. And so, we'll see how the injuries play out this year. I think they're a little bit better. So Chiefs, easy. Broncos, bottom of the division, not close. And Chiefs, Raiders, Chargers, probably more of a toss-up than you have it, but I'll take it in the same order. Chiefs, Chargers, Raiders, Broncos. So,
Tim, as division winners in the AFC comprising the playoff field, division winners, I have Miami, I have Tennessee, I have the Bengals, and I have the Chiefs. As the wildcard teams, I've got the Bills, I've got the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I've got the Los Angeles Chargers. And you have?
For my division winners, I have the Bills, I have the Bengals, I have the Jaguars, and I have the Kansas City Chiefs. My wild card slots going to the Steelers, the Titans, and the Chargers.
Okay, so we're actually pretty close, despite the difference. We think the playoff field is going to be broadly the same. You're an official Miami hater, and I'm an official Jags hater, so we'll file that away for the end of the season. NFC, it's in the National Football Conference now, as it was, I suppose, once called, but I'm not sure anyone's ever actually said that. Are we expecting as much change across the board here? I don't know if you have any big picture thoughts on the NFC. Obviously, we're more AFC orientated as fans of teams in that conference. It seems like a two-horse race at first glance.
Oh, I don't know about that. Listen, you got to remember that it's been a long time, Luke, but when we were talking real football from last season, I was a hater on a particular organization throughout
the definitely
NFL season. And I was a proponent of another team that you were not a proponent of. And so I continue those positions. I still think the Minnesota Vikings, who managed to go 13-4 while having a negative points differential, after watching the Netflix quarterback special, I am sold on Kirk Cousins.
Oh, I like Kirk.
I love me some Kirk Cousins. Go Netflix. It was a great show, by the way. If you didn't watch it, check it out. Netflix. Not sponsored by. But listen, 13-4, found ways to win games, found ways to make the Bills fumble on the half yard. I don't understand how they won that game. They won several games. I don't understand how they won, but they did win.
Biggest comeback in NFL history.
Yeah, well, over Jeff Saturday coached Indianapolis Colts. I mean, that whole thing was wild. I made a lot of money on that game.
Yes.
But yeah,
Well,
so
on that
I
note, Tim,
assume you're
yeah,
saying it's a Eagles Niners
that
race, right?
was my
That's
thought.
your
But as you've
yeah.
mentioned Minnesota, why don't we start this time in the NFC North and you give us the rundown? Minnesota won this division last year, as you mentioned, hosted a playoff game against your favorite quarterback in the NFL, Danny Dimes, which they
Hey
lost.
baby.
And you are backing them to do what in 2023?
Listen, everything I know about football says the Vikings have to be worse next year. Have to be. They just have to be worse next year. They are
Correct.
completely over recorded their performance, if you will. They won more games than anything about their statistics suggests they should have. They were 8-1 at home. That, I mean, crazy town.
Yeah.
For a team
11-0 one-score games.
Yeah, 11-1 score games. The points differential was negative. They just were almost touched by gold, Midas touch or whatever. Like everything they touched turned to gold. Everything in my heart says they have to be worse. I still look at this division and go, I don't know. I mean, Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears ought to be better this year. Is better enough to get you out of 13-3-14 to win the division. I don't know. The Packers, listen, I understand everybody likes Jordan Love from his entire career of 17 dropbacks or whatever it is. They almost have to take a step backwards until they figure out what it is that they have there. The Lions were a ton of fun to watch last year. Did seem to be pulling it together on defense. Can we really expect the same kind of fireworks out of that offense? They scored more points in this division than anybody else, and more than most teams in the NFL. They were the third in the NFC in total points scored, and they scored more points than the San Francisco 49ers. So we'll see. At the end of the day, you've got 4 teams in this division, none of which blow me away. I like the story in Minnesota, and so I'm going to stick with them. I think they win the division. Wow. I have no football support for that other than, yes,
okay.
I expect them to regress, but not enough to lose the division. I think the Detroit Lions, the Green Bay Packers sit right in there around 500 like they did this year. Detroit could bump back a game or two to 7-10 or something. The Packers, same kind of range. Chicago is the wild card for me, and I'm actually going to bring them up to second in this division. I think they're going to be better. I don't think they're better enough to catch the Vikings, again, based on nothing other than I love the story. I think Fields is underrated. I think bringing in a haul of capital from when they had the first overall pick, which they sent to Carolina for DJ Moore plus. The team acquired assets in the offseason. I think they've got an opportunity to make a run for it. Whether or not Justin Fields is good enough to turn them into a playoff contender or not is to be determined. But so I've got the Minnesota Vikings, the Chicago Bears, and then middling performances by the Lions and Packers. I won't say this is one of the better divisions in football, but I will say when you add up their records at the end of the year, you may be surprised. I think you may see a bunch of teams around 500 here.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you on that last point. I was going to say it, but you beat me to the punch, which is that I think this is a little bit slept on as a division. Like we know the NFC is not very strong as a whole on the conference basis right now. I don't have it stacked the same way, but I do think when you get to the end of the season, do I think any of these teams are going to be awful? No, I don't. Now, that will inevitably prove to be incorrect, but as we stand here in early September, that's what I'm going to say. Here is my order in this particular division, Tim. You're not going to like it much. I have Detroit winning this division. I've decided to just go for it. Like, fuck it. Why not? They have to win it at some point, right? So why not now? Like,
no, they don't.
I like the team. They're entertaining. They haven't won the division since it was the NFC Central.
Best points differential in the division last year.
Yeah, they were. You've made your own grave. You've dug your own grave with this, Tim. I have Chicago second as well. I have Chicago as like the surprise package. I feel like there's always one, right? There's always a surprise package in the league.
We both
have
Chicago second,
blah, blah, blah.
so there you go.
We both have Chicago second. Last year it was Seattle, right? Everyone was like, Seattle's going to suck because they got rid of Russell Wilson and they were very good and they made the playoffs. I think the Bears are going to be the surprise package. I'm with you on Justin Fields. I really liked him coming out of Ohio State. People were crapping on him because he was exceptionally up and down last year. I would just say, look at that team around him. They were horrendous. The bigger concern I have with Chicago is actually the defense was awful last year. It was second worst in points per game allowed. That is not good. That does need to get fixed. And listen, I'm not saying they're necessarily going to turn into the 85 Chicago Bears. I think with a defensive-minded head coach, Matt Eberflus, he will get them going a little bit on the defensive side of the ball, enough so that the offensive firepower that they've now acquired, Darnell Mooney, I think, is a good player. Claypool, if he does anything at this point, it's a bonus, but is a third option who can give you points in the paint. I think it's not bad. I like Deontay Foreman. I like Khalil Herbert. I love DJ Moore. I think the team's going to take a step forward. So I've got them second. I have the Packers third, and I have Minnesota dead last. Minnesota is on my list is probably top of my backsliding teams. I won't go into the reasons. You've already elaborated on exactly what they are, which is they were incredibly lucky last year. Every ball that could have bounced their way for the entire regular season. They played what I thought was a fairly limited and average Giants team in the playoffs at home, and they lost. And I think that is more I think that's more the Minnesota Vikings than the preceding season, which sounds kind of crazy because of the volume of evidence. But I just feel like there was just so much that went their way last year. I don't buy into it. Justin Jefferson's great. Hawkinson's great. Kirk will put up good numbers. Obviously, they get rid of Dalvin Cook, who was still productive for this team. Madison, we'll see what happens there. Defensively, they've aged a little bit. I think this is a team which is on the down slope as opposed to the upside. I think last year was the acme or the apex or the zenith or whatever fancy word you want to use for the top. And I think they're going to go down, down, down this year and find themselves in the cellar and restarting next year, which will put them in a good position because Cousins is out of contract and he's probably gone. Quick word on the Packers. I actually like the prospects for this team. I actually quite like Jordan Love as a future player for this team. They've got him under contract at a reasonable rate. They're not going to ask him to be Aaron Rodgers. That's the smart thing to do. LaFleur's going to have to alter how they approach things. A bit more Aaron Jones, a lot more A.J. Dillon, who had a pretty down year last year. I actually like the prospects for this team. They're not going to be a playoff team. I think they're going to be a middling team. And I think the Vikings are going to be in the kind of 6-ish wins range. Honestly, I think they're going to actually have quite a poor season. But I have Detroit winning the division because why the hell not? Let's have some fun in the preseason predictions that don't mean anything. But I do like the Lions, and I'm going to go with them. Defense got it together. Offense stays good. Jared Goff, high on the hog in 2023. Let's go Detroit and have some fun with a DFI team for a change.
All right. Well, the division is obviously insane. So let's move on. Let's try the NFC South on for size.
For what it's worth, we're not that far apart. We just don't. I just don't like Minnesota, and you do. Basically, is what we are lit.
Well, what's funny is the Packers will obviously win the division. The Vikings will be second. The Lions will be last, and the Bears will be third. Or something. I don't know what's going to happen.
The Bears. We've hyped the Bears, so they're going to win one game, and Justin Fields will look terrible. But we'll see what happens.
That's right. All right. So into the NFC South. What a division last year. 8-9 won it.
Yeah.
7-10 damn near won it for everybody who didn't win it. This is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be without the Tom and the Tampa. So it'd be interesting to see how they evolve with. Are they going Baker Mayfield at quarterback?
They are going Baker Mayfield at quarterback. Yep.
Interesting choice. Listen,
he does love a red flag, Tim. So that suits the Buccaneers well.
Sure. So here's where I'm stuck. Right. If I go with everything I know about football, the Bucs have to get a lot worse. They just have to. They're losing Tom Brady, best quarterback, at least most successful quarterback in the history of the NFL, certainly in the time that I've been watching football, isn't going to be playing football for them any longer, and they weren't good with him. They have had to hemorrhage talent because of their salary cap situation. They have done their best to pull together 53 human beings to play football down in Tampa. It just has to be worse. Now, that said, what am I excited about out of the other three? Atlanta used their number one draft pick on a running back. Okay. I don't see that, giving them this huge step up. The New Orleans Saints did nothing in the offseason to get me super excited. The Carolina Panthers had the number one overall pick, right? You've got a new quarterback there. There's some hype right around that. That rarely translates itself into excellence in year one. So who in this division is going to step out, exceed expectations? This was the biggest coin flip for me. You look at this,
right.
This division made no sense. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers had the worst points differential last year. They won the division anyway. The best points differential was still negative 15, and that was the Saints. The Falcons, yay. We talked about them quite a bit last week. This whole division we talked about, you could have put all four of these teams in the DFI if you really wanted to. So I'm going to go in this order for the only reason that me and my children wrote their names on pieces of paper and we put them in a fishbowl and we drew them out. And so I'm gonna go.
This is good.
Saints.
A
I'm
peek
going
behind the
Saints,
curtain of the science here.
Saints, Panthers, Bucks, Falcons, in that order. I mean, I got nothing. That's it.
Yeah, it pains me a little bit to know that you pulled out names at random and I had the exact four in the same order, which either says a lot for your kind of ESP when it comes to random prognostication or my lack of skills. I think I agree that I have the Saints winning this division by default. Like, much as it's a stupid thing to say that, right? Because teams don't win divisions by default. Like, I think Atlanta, they are my number one sneaky terrible team this year. And I say sneaky terrible. I know you're going to say they weren't very good last year. They weren't. They won a bunch of games, right? Despite being
7.
terrible. That's more than they should have won in my humble estimation. They are just going to play in such a limited fashion because that's what Arthur Smith likes offenses to do. I know. I watched it. Unless Desmond Ridder gets a lot better and they let him do stuff, I don't really see it. Like, I know the Titans won a lot of games with this formula, but they also had a really good defense. Atlanta's defense is not particularly good. Certainly not good enough to overcome running kind of a ground and pound Jeff Fisher style kind of offense with some play action pass. We mentioned them extensively on the Downtrodden Franchise Index pod last week that you mentioned. Go check it out. Any listeners who have not checked that out, a lot of fun. As we crapped on NFL teams, they have Kyle Pitts. They have no interest in using him, even though he's really good. They do stuff like sign Jonnu Smith, who I like. Jonnu Smith, he played for the Titans. He was good, but like, is he amazing? No, he's a complimentary piece. I just think they're going to be bad this year, and I think that they don't. I don't feel like they actually showed a lot of ambition, oddly, in this offseason. Like, it just seemed like we're going to kind of do more of the same and hope for the better results, which I don't buy. So I don't think they'll be good. I think Tampa's going to suck this year, just for what it's worth. I just have Atlanta as worse than them. I think Tampa are going to be dreadful this year. Dreadful. Like 5 wins, dreadful. Quarterback situation you mentioned. The other thing, good NFL head coach on evidence to date. He was with the Jets for a while. And listen, we're not going to become one of these, oh, these are terrible, fire this guy, blah, blah. I don't think Todd Bowles is a particularly... It didn't really work out there. There was a lot of... I don't know what the right word is. Ado, I suppose, in the New York area, which is not very common. He's taken over from Arians, who is a very specific style. Todd Bowles is a bit more old school, disciplinarian type. BA, as he is known. BA, Bruce Arians, was not. You no longer have Tom Brady. That hurts. I think this team's going to be dreadful. I agree. I thought they were crap last year. They somehow won the division, basically because Tom Brady has a pact with Satan. Carolina, I like the team on defense. I hate the team on offense at this point. They traded away their best offensive player last season, Christian McCaffrey. Then in the offseason, to follow it up, they traded their next best offensive player to the Bears, DJ Moore. I think Deontay Foreman was really good for this team. I think they're going to miss him in the backfield, although I think Miles Sanders is a good player. And I have New Orleans winning. I think Derek Carr's pretty good. I think Derek Carr's like a top 12 NFL quarterback type. It's not mind-blowing. I think the Saints were probably the best team in this division last year, if you look at it, certainly on points differential, as you mentioned, and just on the eye test. And I feel like Derek Carr gives them enough of a push up the standings to win it. So I have New Orleans winning it, and Carolina second with a fairly middling record as Bryce Young acclimatizes, as I would say, to the league, or acclimates to the league, as you would say. So I have it the same way.
Yeah, no, funny that we end up in the same order, obviously getting there in very different ways. It'll be interesting. I think you talk about the Falcons being sneaky bad. I certainly think that's very, very possible. The other thing I will say, and flies in the face of everything I said before, I like Baker Mayfield. I think he got a raw deal in Cleveland. Clearly, another one of these special snowflakes who needs to be patted on the back, right? When the team didn't have his back in the whole Odell thing, the video didn't look good that Odell's daddy posted. I mean, like, it was a whole thing. And that was, he flamed out. They brought in Deshaun Watson and paid a absolute stupid contract to do it. We talk about throwing you out of town, but all that to say, I think he was underrated in the way he left. He did good things for that team. I would like to see Baker do well. I just don't. He's not Tom Brady. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I don't think he's bad at all. And you still got Mike Evans, you still got Chris Godwin, Rashad White shows a promise in the backfield. I just think it's a whole lot of on the team in general. Like, they might put up some good stats concerned if you're less than Peyton Manning. Why don't we move on to but I don't have a lot of faith in the team. I agree with you, though. I think Baker is better than people make him out to be. I think the first overall pick thing just puts you in the doghouse as
Moving
far as
to
the media.
the NFC West. Whoa, hey, transition at the same time.
No,
a division with
segue flag.
Yeah, quite a bit more.
I'm not joking.
Let's say variability between the top and the bottom of the differential last year. The San Francisco 49ers, one of the best teams in the NFL, the best team in the NFL when you look at points differential, which, as we've discussed at length, I do. One of the worst teams, though not quite the worst team in points differential, in the Arizona Cardinals. And a couple of teams in the middle, one who overperformed in the Seattle Seahawks. Everybody expected, and we talked about this a minute ago, them to be terrible after getting rid of their Hall of Fame quarterback, Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is the number one overrated player in the history of NFL football. He was terrible before, but he had an excellent team around him. He can throw some moon balls. They had amazing receivers and a great offensive line that made him look far better than he ever played. Gino Montana went in there and said, well, everything you can do, I can do better. And the team was better with Gino Montana than they were with Russell Wilson. And to their credit, they got a lot of assets in that trade and deployed them well. On the other side, you have the Los Angeles Rams, who underperformed, had injury challenges. You would have expected certainly better than a 5-12 record out of the Rams. They've had some
probably the most disappointing team in the NFL last year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they've had some challenges with the cap. Read a headline today that Cooper Kupp is now seeing a specialist for a hamstring injury. That's not going to make you feel good if you're a Rams fan. They've had to let some talent go over the last couple of years. This F them pick strategy left the cupboard a little bit bare when you run into some challenges. And so the depth wasn't quite there for this team. They were head first into superstars. It was kind of like that fantasy style roster build, right? Go get the best player at every position and just
exactly.
hope they all stay healthy.
To Jalen Ramsey, and then last offseason they brought in Bobby Wagner. You've obviously got Aaron Donald. You would expect.
For your next 32 injuries, first round picks. Yeah.
Injuries for this team were absolutely savage. Not necessarily just the number. Sorry, I thought. Just a thought guy. Anyway, but yeah, Stafford was
maybe
injured.
You were
Cup
getting
was
on
injured,
a motorbike.
Aaron Donald was injured. The team stank, and motorbikes went past me. If you're wondering in the pod listenership land what that noise was, maybe you should put a muffler on it. They just completely fell apart. So I hear you that variability is the watchword. How do you have this stacking up in 2023? It sounds like you kind of have it the same as last year.
The 49ers are clearly the best team on talent in the division, with the massive asterisk at the quarterback position. Look, maybe Brock Purdy is Tom Brady. I don't know. We didn't see enough of Brock Purdy last year to make that kind of a distinction. Obviously, the front office in San Francisco feels that they've found something in Brock Purdy, or they continue to feel, as I've argued for a period of time, it doesn't matter who plays quarterback in that offense. As long as you are really reasonably accurate and don't overplay your hand, just throw the ball to the guy who's open or run or fall down. Like those, just don't throw the ball to the wrong guy.
Be efficient, don't throw it to the other team.
Yeah. And so I expect them to win the division. Obviously, if Brock Purdy comes out and plays like most 7th-round draft pick quarterbacks, Mr. Irrelevance, then they will regress. And they have, they don't have Trey Lance anymore because they traded him because he's a worthless player that they only invested 3 first-round picks and a lot of, I don't know what they're doing in San Francisco, but it seems to work. So I'm not going to hate on it. I've got San Francisco winning the division out of a lack of other options. Arizona clearly at the bottom of the division, as much as I had absolutely loved Gino Montana and what they were doing in Seattle. I don't know how sustainable it is. Gino Smith was just Geno Smith every year until last year. It's much more likely he goes back to being that guy. He's got a little contract. Good for him. Love it. Tons of fun to watch last year. They were 9-8. They're 5-4 on home, 4-4 on the road, 500 in the conference. It was just kind of that right around average, plus 6 points to differential. Finish the year on a 2-game win streak instead of a 2-game losing streak. And so you go 9-8 instead of 7-10. they're just kind of average. I have to think the Rams get better. They have to be better than they were last
Yeah.
year. They can't have the injury luck they had last year. They can't have everything go against them the way it did last year. They're not going to get shellacked by Baker. They're not going to have Baker Mayfield come in and win some games for them. Like, it's going to be a more cohesive football season for the Los Angeles Rams than it was last year. And so I have to think they get better. So it all comes to, do the Seattle Seahawks regress beyond where the Rams improved to? And I'm going to say yes, just because divisions never finish the same way 2 years in a row. And so I'm going to go Niners, Rams, Seahawks, Cardinals, though every fiber of my body would prefer the Seahawks to take a step forward.
Yeah.
And if not finish second, maybe even win the division. But I'm going to go Niners, Rams, Seahawks, Cardinals.
Okay. So I disagree with you in that I think the division is going to finish the exact same way. I have both West's divisions staying the same. I think San Francisco, just quick note on the Purdy thing, because I'm sure we'll talk about it in the season. We talked about it last season. I actually think the funny thing about the QB situation in San Francisco, the number one thing it reminds me of is the Mike Shanahan running back situation, which is funny because obviously Carl's the head coach now in San Francisco. Do you remember in the early 2000s or late 90s, for those of us old enough to remember, you could put Mike Anderson, Olandis Gary, Tatum Bell, whoever in the backfield for the Mike Shanahan Broncos, and they would look like the second coming of, Tony Dorsett. Like, they would just rack up yards, rack up points. The quarterback position in this offense is complementary. They made the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, who is fine. Can Brock Purdy be Jimmy Garoppolo? I think he absolutely can. Can he be Tom Brady? Absolutely don't think he can. But that doesn't really matter. If he is Jimmy Garoppolo, the team around him is outstanding. So I think it shouldn't matter enough. I agree. Listen, I think the advantage there is that if they can have competent backup play, the Sam Darnold, even if Brock Purdy stinks or gets injured, the fact they can plug in a guy who's played some football, who knows what he's doing, who can operate the offense, hopefully not turn the ball over, that should be enough. So yeah, I have San Francisco winning. I like Geno a bit more than you do. I'm not saying, again, this is a similar situation. Is he going to take another step forward? I don't think so. Can he produce the same? I do think so. I really like Lockett. Obviously, Metcalf's great. I think Smith and Jigba may have the best rookie season of any wide receiver. He's just very crafty, knows how to get open. It's a very handy trait to have. They got a good running back in Ken Walker. They brought another good running back in Zach Charbonnet. But they know what that formula. Carroll knows how he wants his team to operate. And I think similar to the Niners, they'll win a game a certain way. But they'll stick to it. So I think it's more repeatable than maybe you do. I think the Rams are going to be bad again. Stafford's getting older. He's coming off an injury. He's got beaten to death over the course of his career. Aaron Donald's another year older. You got rid of Jalen Ramsey. You lost Leonard Floyd. They got rid of Bobby Wagner. Cooper Kupp's injured again. Like, I just have nothing to hang my hat on with this team. I like McVay, and I think if anyone could be creative enough to work around that, he can, if Stafford stays healthy. I don't think this team's going to be that much better record-wise than they were a year ago, frankly, because the fire sale that they've gone through, I think it's too much chop and change. I don't really see how they're going to manufacture enough points on offense. I don't think the defense is anything special. I have this team winning, 6 or so games again, and I think it's going to be a bit of a hard reboot come next offseason. It'll be a lot of the same conversations as were had this year. So I have the Rams finishing third. Arizona, we spoke about them on the Downtrodden Franchise pod last week. Awful. If they win 2 games, good for them. They're going to be awful. Cover your ears and eyes and hold your breath. Well, don't hold your breath for a win if you're an Arizona fan, because you'll die. So Arizona's going to stink. So I have the same division set up as last year. So we're in the same ballpark, but I think Seattle will be better. NFC East, Tim, last division we're going to talk about. Your number one most hated on franchise last year was probably the Eagles. I have the Eagles winning this division again. I think similar to the Niners, the level of sheer talent on the roster is significant. Jalen Hurts, I don't think will be as good as he was last year, to be absolutely clear. I think he will be good again. I'm going to buy the stock in him to a degree. I'm not saying he's going to be MVP caliber again. I don't know how realistic that is. But I think even if he's not, the way the offense is constructed in terms of his running ability, a multitude of backs, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, got a very good offensive line. Defense is pretty much stacked across the board, and they kept most of it together. I know good teams staying good has been the watchword of this pod. Don't believe what happened last year. They lost the Super Bowl. Super Bowl hangover is a thing. I think they're going to win the division. I will say, I think this is a close division again this year. It was pretty close last year. I think people think Philadelphia was like 5 games better than everyone else, and they weren't. They were 1 game better than the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys are going to be better this year. So I have the Cowboys finishing behind them. largely because I think Dak will throw fewer interceptions, and I'm more of a fan of Dak than I think you are. I have Daniel Dimes and the Giants finishing third, and I have Washington finishing last. So I actually have it the same as last year, which is a kind of a poison pill for predictions, as I mentioned, but I'm doing it anyway. And I have Philadelphia winning it, and I have Dallas making the playoffs. Tell me why the Giants are going to win this division, winning 15 games, and then we can compare notes.
Well, listen, the Eagles have. If you were ever going to pick a team to repeat, it would be the Eagles, right? They lost very little in quintessential talent. I remember we did our postseason review, offseason preview pods, team by team, and we did the Eagles, and we talked about how they were going to have to lose everybody because the cap was crazy, and they were never going to be able to bring all the. And everybody came back.
Right.
I don't know how it works, but I was.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And then they went into the draft, and somehow the Eagles come out of the draft with probably the best defensive player in the draft. And so you lose nothing of note. You add incredible players at positions of what I would call pure luxury for the Eagles, who were already very, very good across the defensive front. And so what exactly is it about what has happened to Philadelphia in the last 7 months that makes me think they're going to be worse than they were last year? And the answer is absolutely nothing, except this is the NFL, and that's what happens. You lose the Super Bowl, you go backwards. It's hard to get up and play. All right. All of a sudden, Jalen Hurts isn't a darling Bella de ball, right? He's expected to win. He's expected to be great. And if he's not great, people are going to go, what's wrong with the quarterback? In a way they wouldn't have before. You do a whole off season full of press where everybody expects you to win the division, expects you to win the Super Bowl, expects you to be a top team, or perhaps a generational team if you look at some of the talent they were able to hold on to, some of the talent they were able to add. Obviously electric on offense last year, putting up almost 500 points. Crazy town, same kind of league as the Chiefs with a better defense, frankly. And so you look at the defense, you look at what the offense was, and you go, how does it go backwards? And I am going to exercise my right as a talking head to say, I don't know, but they're going to. And I would guess it has something to do with expectations. I would guess it has something to do with, do we really give a rat's ass about some random game in week 3? We're one of the best teams in football. We don't care until the postseason rolls around, and you can give away some games doing it that way. I do not have the Eagles winning this division. I do not have the Cowboys winning this division.
You have the Giants winning this division. Yes.
Dak Prescott is a fraud. Dak Prescott has always been a fraud. They paid him way too much money. I think trading for Trey Lance actually puts an awful bug in the back of Dak Prescott's head about what they plan to do with his contract or not do with his contract. That stuff eats at you. It's too important of a position. The Cowboys lost Dak and played fine. Listen, Cowboys are going to lose more games than they lost last year, 12-5. It was an overperformance for them. Stop it.
I agree with that for what it's worth.
Okay, good. You said they were going to get better, so I don't understand how that square that circle. But the 12-5 Cowboys are going to be more like the 10-7 Cowboys. Your New York Football Giants, 9-7-1 last year, lost every possible game they could have lost, and a couple I'm not sure how they did. MVP candidate Danny Dimes will continue to show out this year. However, there's always one surprise team in every NFL season where everybody goes, where did that come from? And I believe that overcoming an owner like Dan Snyder is the type of off-the-field thing that can energize a franchise. You bring in a new owner who's got deep pockets, who's not a horrible human, at least not publicly. You bring in a guy who, is going to try to do what he can to bring the team around. You're going to have a better relationship with the community. You're going to have a better relationship with the media. You're going to have a better relationship with the league. I think the players are refreshed. I think it hurts to go work for a guy like Dan Snyder, and the fact that you're not working for that guy anymore can have interesting positive impacts. I think the team got better in the offseason. I think they were better than they appeared to be last year. Finishing the year 8-1, 500 in a season where there are odd number of games is an interesting accomplishment in and of itself. I have the Washington Commanders at 11-6, winning this division.
Wow.
I have the Giants second. I have the Eagles third and the Cowboys fourth. You heard it here first. That's your order for the NFC East. Commanders, Giants, Eagles, Cowboys.
So, quick couple of thoughts on what you just said. Number one, you're categorically off your rocker, as we would say in England. But the fighting Sam Howells are not going to win this division.
They are.
And the primary reason is the fighting Sam Howell have Sam Howell at quarterback. I don't see. Well, I think Washington will probably improve. I think this is a really strong division. I think the Giants are also good. I think this may be another situation where every team is at or around 500, like we talked about a couple of these other divisions. Right. As far as the Cowboys, I think when I said I think they'll improve, like the record. This sounds stupid, but like I don't think the record is reflective of if you were better or worse. Obviously, it is to a degree, but they weren't very impressive for a lot of last year. Is what I guess I was trying to get at. And I feel like Dak returned the ball over. They were finding ways to win games. Obviously, Tony Pollard is a star. CeeDee Lamb is a star. I like the Brandon Cooks addition. So I think they're going to look better. Whether they win 13 or 14 games is a different ball of wax. I just think the Giants are a backslide team. They had a great run last year with this like novel offensive style because Danny Dimes was running around all the time, and Saquon was kind of not very productive. But the name Saquon Barkley helped people stack the box against this team. I don't think Danny Dimes is particularly good, but obviously you do and always have. So we'll save that one for this season. Everything you said about Philadelphia is 100% true, and that's why I picked them to repeat. Although I completely understand what you're saying. Things just happen that you weren't expecting to happen. It's the NFL. So for me, I've got Philly, Dallas, Giants, Washington. You've got Washington, Giants, Philadelphia, Dallas. So almost exactly the reverse, which is, I think, as scorching a take as is possible to have, Tim. And I think that's a good place for us to wrap. But before we do that, the NFC playoff picture, as per myself, Luke, co-host of the Half Yard Line, is as follows. Division champions, Philadelphia, New Orleans, Detroit, and San Francisco, and wildcard teams Dallas, Chicago, and Seattle. And Tim, yours are for posterity.
For posterity, I have the New Orleans Saints winning the South. I have the San Francisco 49ers winning the West. I have the Washington Commanders winning the East. And I have the Minnesota Vikings winning the North. In the wild card spots, which we didn't officially say earlier, but I have, are you ready? The New York Giants. I'm
so ready. Shock.
The Dallas Cowboys and the Chicago Bears.
Don't you have Dallas finishing below Philadelphia?
No, I have Dallas and then Philly.
Oh, you have Dallas above? Okay, my fault. So yeah, you have the NFCs in the exact reverse order as me. So you have Philly missing the playoffs entirely.
I do.
The Super Bowl hangover, very much real, but you are very excited about some other prospects in the NFC, specifically.
Let me tell you a secret.
The Giants. Go for it.
If you look at the NFC East standings as they are today, post preseason, the Washington Commanders are 3-0. The New York Giants 1-2. However, winning the tiebreak with the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles at 0-2-1. I believe
Amazing.
The preseason will repeat in the regular season. I have got them in the same order, so there is precedent. Well, I'm not crazy.
There's precedent, Tim. So there you go, guys and gals, and everyone out there in pod listenership land. Those are the official 100% certain to be correct Half Yard Line pod predictions for the 2023 NFL season. We will clip this and we will revisit it at the end of the year. That is an official promise from the Half Yard Line, and we can all have a good laugh at them. We may do awards and that kind of thing later on down the track. We're not going to do it today if you're wondering, but please join us on all future pods. The season is about to begin, and we'll be with you from week 1 through the Super Bowl on the Half Yard Line. Find us on your podcast app of choice. Leave us a rating and a review. Subscribe to the pod. Find us on all the socials at Half Yard Line Pod. Find us on YouTube, Half Yard Line Pod as well. We look forward to you joining us, and we look forward to you giving us some interesting feedback, no doubt, on these preseason predictions for the NFL season. So, Tim, it's been a blast, my friend. I look forward to Thursday night happening and me completely bailing on the Lions. I look forward to your official reporting from Buffalo, New York, and Buffalo versus New York, I should say, not Buffalo, New York. But until then, we shall see you soon.
Bye-bye.